Denita was a light in this dark world. That's what she was about. She was just a cup of love.
No warning, no chance to fight back, just a gunshot and darkness. That's exactly what happened to 25-year-old Denita Smith, a bright graduate student with her whole future ahead of her. But this wasn't a random act of violence. Police would soon uncover a web of secrets, lies, and a fatal obsession, all leading back to someone Denita trusted most. This is the story of how love, betrayal, and jealousy turned deadly, and why one woman's life was cut tragically short. Denita was pursuing her graduate studies and planning a future with the man she loved. But everything changed on a quiet morning, January 4th, when she stepped out of her apartment. As she walked down the staircase, someone approached from behind and took her life in a single moment. As investigators tried to understand who could do this, they learned that the man Denita was preparing to marry had been living a life she didn't know about, choices he made in secret that would ultimately end in her tragic loss. As the truth unfolded, Denita's case became more than just another crime to solve. It became a painful reminder of how betrayal can hide in plain sight. Her death was senseless, yes, but her life was full of promise. Denita's loved ones continue to share her story, not to relive the pain, but to honor the person she was before that morning. And maybe, just maybe, to remind us all that sometimes the greatest mystery is not who did it, but why someone so full of life had to be written out of it so soon. Denita Smith deserves to be remembered not just for what happened to her, but for everything she was before that. She had dreams, laughter, and a future she didn't get to finish. Every time her name is mentioned, her family hopes it brings focus back to her, not the tragedy alone. After all, the story doesn't start with the crime, it starts with the person whose life was unfairly cut short. And maybe the smallest irony here is that in trying to hide the truth, someone made sure it would be told forever. But before we begin, I just want to say thank you to my amazing viewers and subscribers. Your support through likes, shares, and comments means the world to me. Your engagement helps make these stories even more meaningful. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. Denita Smith came into the world on November 20th, 1981 in Charlotte, North Carolina. She was raised by her parents, Calvin and Sharon Smith, alongside a brother and a sister. Her mother often reflected on Denita's early years, describing her as a cheerful and well-behaved child who rarely caused any worry. After completing her education at West Charlotte High School, Denita moved to Durham to attend North Carolina Central University. There she majored in English, and those who knew her spoke of her determination, intelligence, and ability to inspire those around her. Denita had a way of showing up when people needed her most, a friend who never needed to be asked twice. While attending North Carolina Central, she joined the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, where she quickly became a beloved sister to many. Her warmth and kindness were more than memorable, they were magnetic. Beyond academics and sorority life, Denita had always been drawn to photography. According to her mother, cameras were her first love, long before college ever entered the picture. That passion led her to work as a student photojournalist, a role she embraced wholeheartedly and planned to pursue after graduation. She didn't just take pictures, she captured stories, even if life had an unexpected story waiting for her too. Once she earned her bachelor's degree, Denita chose to keep moving forward. She enrolled in a master's program at the same university, ready to continue building on the path she had worked so hard to pave. Her drive was something people admired. Denita didn't just talk about goals, she followed through. Whether it was her education, her dreams, or the people she loved, Denita showed up fully. It's one of life's cruel ironies that someone so committed to their future never got the chance to see just how bright it would have been. At North Carolina Central, Denita was well liked and admired by those around her. During undergrad, she met Jameer Stout, and the two quickly became known as a campus power couple. Denita's friends spoke highly of him, and even her mother, Sharon, who admitted she looked for red flags, couldn't help but like him. He was polite, respectful, and seemed to be everything Denita deserved. Their relationship lasted beyond college. Even after 𝐀𝐫𝐜𝐿 became a police officer in Greensboro, they stayed together. In November 2006, he proposed. Denita was wrapping up her master's degree, planning their wedding, and had just earned a fellowship with the New York Times. Everything in her life was aligning beautifully. At just 25, Denita had built the kind of life most people dream about: love, purpose, and a bright career ahead. But behind that picture-perfect life, something was being hidden, a secret that Denita didn't see coming, and one she wouldn't live to uncover. In January 2007, Denita was preparing for a new semester and the next chapter of her life. But on the morning of January 4th, everything changed, and all the plans, goals, and joy she carried into the new year were stolen in a moment she never saw coming. Around 8:10 that morning, a maintenance worker at Campus Crossing heard what he thought was a gunshot near the 1100 building. Moments later, he noticed a young woman sprinting toward the back of the complex where the parking lot was. What struck him as odd was the route she took. Residents usually used a more direct path, so her choice stood out. Curious and concerned, he decided to get in his vehicle and drive over. That's when he spotted what looked like the same woman behind the wheel of a burgundy SUV. As he approached the SUV, he could see that she was visibly shaken, crying and covering her face with her hands. When he asked if she had heard the loud sound, she nodded. She explained that she had a deep fear of firearms and was overwhelmed by what she had just experienced. She also told him she lived in Building 1200. Trying to calm the situation, the worker suggested she return home while he contacted the authorities. The man said that while he was still on the phone with 911, he saw her again briefly. But by the time officers arrived, she had left the area. With no visible scene and no evidence of a shooting at the location, police made no official report. In hindsight, it's one of those moments that might have seemed like nothing until it turned out to mean everything. About 2 hours after the earlier sound was heard, another call came into 911. Just before 10 a.m., a resident at Campus Crossing was heading out for work when he noticed personal items scattered across the stairs. At first, he assumed someone had simply dropped their things, but when he looked closer, he saw a person lying at the bottom of the staircase, unmoving and clearly unwell. He called emergency services right away. On the call, he said it looked like the person may have taken a fall and suffered a head injury, as there was visible bleeding. He asked the dispatcher if he should check the purse nearby for ID, and when he did, he found a name, Denita Smith, though there was no sign of life from her. After the call, he went to inform the apartment staff about what he had found. The same maintenance worker from earlier was soon made aware. Once Denita's identity was confirmed, word reached North Carolina Central University and eventually her family. Her mother, Sharon, later shared that she was initially told Denita had fallen and was unconscious, but they were trying to help her up. A hopeful start to a heartbreaking truth. At the time, Sharon and her children were still living in Charlotte, about a 2-hour drive from Durham. As soon as she heard about the incident involving Denita, Sharon got in her car and headed to Durham. Knowing she wouldn't get there quickly, she reached out to 𝐀𝐫𝐿, Denita's fiancé, and asked him to go in her place, hoping he'd arrive sooner. No one in Denita's family yet knew the full story. All they had been told was that she had suffered some kind of accident. Meanwhile, Denita's best friend Edith had been trying to get in touch with her throughout the morning but hadn't heard back. That silence was concerning. Denita never ignored calls, especially from her. Denita's brother, who happened to live in the same apartment complex, had heard something had happened nearby. Wanting to know more, he reached out to Edith and asked if she'd heard from Denita. He wasn't sure what had occurred, only that there was some kind of emergency. After trying Denita's phone again with no luck, Edith called 𝐀𝐫𝐿 to check if he had spoken with her. By then, 𝐀𝐫𝐿 was aware that something had happened. Sharon had already contacted him. He told Edith he had heard about an incident and that he was on his way to Durham. During the conversation, Edith noticed that his responses were oddly unclear. When she asked if he'd spoken directly with Denita, he didn't offer a straightforward answer. Still, he assured her he was on his way and would share more when he knew something. Once first responders reached the scene, it became immediately clear that Denita had not survived. The question facing investigators was now critical. Had this been a tragic misstep, or something far more intentional? When detectives arrived and secured the area, they began piecing together what had taken place. As they examined Denita's body more closely, the answer became unavoidable. This had not been an accident. A single wound told the story. Denita had been shot. And just like that, what began as confusion turned into a homicide investigation. It didn't take long for detectives to rule out robbery. Denita's belongings, her purse and keys, were still at the scene, untouched. From the position of her items, investigators believed she had been on her way out of her apartment when someone approached her from behind as she descended the stairs. The bigger question wasn't what was taken, it was why this happened at all. As officers processed the scene, Denita's friends and family began arriving one after another. Edith was first, followed by Jameer, and then Sharon. It was there, at the apartment complex, that they were informed of the news no one wants to hear. Denita was gone. In an interview, Sharon later described the moment officers told her that her daughter's death had been intentional. From that day forward, she said, nothing in her world ever felt normal again. Jameer, who had just arrived, spoke briefly with police. He gave them basic information and answered a few questions. Because he was Denita's fiancé, detectives would eventually need to rule him out as a suspect, but that afternoon they allowed him to leave and return to Greensboro. Just 2 hours after Denita was found, detectives received a new lead. They were informed of a 911 call made earlier that morning. The maintenance worker who placed the call told them he had heard a loud noise and seen a young woman nearby. He said she lived in the complex, stood about 5'10", had a ponytail, and drove a burgundy SUV. Initially, the woman's emotional reaction made officers believe she might have seen something important. She was thought to be a potential eyewitness, and the search to identify and speak with her quickly became a priority. The very next day, January 5th, Jameer contacted investigators again. He had learned they were looking for a vehicle that matched the one driven by the woman the maintenance worker had described. He mentioned someone he knew who drove a similar SUV. Detectives then asked Jameer to come back to Durham for a formal interview. He agreed, and during that conversation, what he shared gave investigators the breakthrough they had been waiting for. On January 4th, 2007, Denita Smith, just 25 years old, was found dead outside her apartment in Durham, North Carolina. In the hours that followed, what started as a tragic discovery became the beginning of a case built on secrecy, deception, and a story that would only get more complicated. Once after Denita's body was found, investigators followed up with the maintenance worker who had witnessed unusual activity earlier that morning. He mentioned a woman in a burgundy SUV who had told him she heard the sound. Though he didn't know her personally, officers believed she might have seen something important, and locating her became a key part of the early investigation. Fortunately for detectives, they didn't have to look far. The day after the incident, Jameer reached out to the lead investigator with what appeared to be a helpful tip. He knew someone who drove a vehicle matching that description. On January 5th, 2007, Jameer returned to Durham and met with detectives. He shared that the woman's name was Shannon Crawley, and she worked as a 911 dispatcher in Greensboro. According to Jameer, they had been romantically involved between 2004 and 2005, but he claimed the relationship had ended long before the tragedy. Jameer explained that they had met a few years earlier while he was still in the police academy. Though he had been in a relationship with Denita at the time, he told detectives that when he reconnected with Shannon in 2004, he asked for her number. Despite his existing commitment, he admitted he had started an affair with her because, in his words, she was attractive. Detectives asked whether Denita and Shannon had ever met. Jameer said no, but acknowledged that Shannon knew about Denita. He had a photo of Denita in his apartment, and Shannon had seen it when she helped him move. Still, Denita had never been told about Shannon, He also revealed that Shannon had once become pregnant during their relationship but had chosen to end the pregnancy. After the interview, the lead detective made his way to Greensboro to speak with Shannon directly. During the conversation, she was described as calm and cooperative. She explained that she had taken her child to a medical appointment that morning, which had made her late for work, a detail that on its own might not have raised questions, if only she hadn't been driving a burgundy SUV. Shannon confirmed that she had been in a relationship with 𝐩𝐫, backing up most of what he had already shared with investigators. She also confirmed that the relationship had ended in early 2006 after she had terminated a pregnancy. When asked about her presence in Durham, Shannon told the detective she had never been there. He then asked if she had ever owned a firearm. She said no, adding that she disliked guns and had no interest in owning one. She explained she had never met Denita and firmly denied having any involvement in what had happened. When asked whether she believed 𝐩𝐫 could ever commit a violent act, she responded without hesitation. She didn't think he was capable of that. But as the detective was leaving Shannon's workplace, a colleague quietly handed him a note saying he had something to share. When they spoke, the coworker said 𝐩𝐫 had been contacting Shannon frequently, even at work, and that it had been going on for months. He said Shannon had expressed fear for her safety. The coworker told the detective that 𝐩𝐫 would appear at Shannon's home unannounced, often armed. Concerned, the coworker had offered to sell her a .38 caliber handgun and provided her with ammunition. He even showed her how to handle it just in case. This new testimony conflicted with what Shannon had just told detectives. She had insisted she never owned a gun and had no reason to fear 𝐩𝐫. She even described him as someone incapable of violence, something that now seemed questionable. The update caused investigators to reevaluate both individuals. If Shannon had felt threatened by 𝐩𝐫, it raised the question, had Denita unknowingly been in danger too? On January 6, 2007, 𝐩𝐫 was asked to return for another interview. When questioned, he denied ever bothering Shannon or making her feel unsafe. But when asked if he thought Shannon could be capable of harming someone, his answer stood in contrast to hers. He said yes. After their second conversation with 𝐩𝐫, detectives returned to Campus Crossing to speak again with the maintenance worker. This time they showed him a photo of Shannon. He wasn't entirely certain if she was the same woman he saw that morning, but when he was shown a picture of her SUV, he had no doubt that was the vehicle he had seen. Since he couldn't confirm her identity beyond the vehicle, investigators knew they would need additional proof. One detail from his original account stood out. He remembered that the woman's shirt had some kind of patch on it. Interestingly, Shannon's work uniform at the 911 center included a shirt with patches on the sleeves. They also found out from her supervisor that she had clocked in at 10 a.m. that day, leaving enough time for a round trip to Durham before work. That timing, paired with her vehicle match and inconsistencies in her story, moved her higher up on the list of persons of interest. Despite her claims about 𝐩𝐫's behavior, detectives noticed that it was Shannon whose story was raising more red flags. So far, she had been the only one who left out important details, particularly about her connection to the kind of firearm used in the shooting. Ballistics suggested that the fatal shot came from a .38 caliber handgun, the same type of weapon her coworker said he gave her, and the same one she insisted she never had. With that, detectives were granted a warrant to search her residence. Officers searched her home thoroughly, but there was no physical evidence linking her to the crime. No weapon, no ammunition, no stained clothing. The only item of note was her patched work shirt. For now, that shirt was the closest thing they had to tying her to the scene, but still far from the smoking gun. As the case progressed, investigators reviewed Shannon's phone activity to verify her whereabouts on January 4th. During her earlier interview, she stated that she had never been to Durham, but her phone data suggested otherwise, another detail she hadn't exactly been forthcoming about. Records showed her device connected to a cell tower just 100 feet from Denita's apartment complex the day before the murder. This led detectives to suspect that Shannon may have gone there in advance, possibly to observe the area before returning. Detectives also reviewed 𝐩𝐫's phone records. His device activity confirmed that he had not been in Durham at the time of the incident, supporting his previous account to police. As more facts came to light, attention began to shift more firmly toward Shannon. She didn't fit the typical profile. She was a working mother with a career in public service. But as one investigator put it, evidence doesn't always check resumes before pointing fingers. Her vehicle was brought in and tested for traces of gunshot residue. Samples taken from the steering wheel and gear shift came back positive. Additionally, the clinic where she said she took her child that morning confirmed she had missed the appointment entirely. By this stage, police believed the case against Shannon was strong enough to move forward. Just 5 days after Denita's body was discovered, Shannon Crawley was taken into custody. The part still unclear to investigators was the motive. The relationship with 𝐩𝐫 had supposedly ended a year earlier. So what would drive someone to commit such an act so long after? According to police, Shannon never truly let go. 𝐩𝐫 claimed she had continued to contact him, even showing up uninvited and calling him persistently. In his view, she was unwilling to accept that things were over, a dangerous kind of loyalty that had taken a tragic turn. Shannon's family painted a different picture. They claimed it was 𝐩𝐫 who had crossed boundaries, showing up at her home uninvited and refusing to leave her alone. Still, investigators sided with 𝐩𝐫's version of events. They noted that Shannon had purchased a home just a few minutes from where 𝐩𝐫 lived, only a few months before the murder. Detectives believed things escalated when she saw 𝐩𝐫 and Denita together at a Christmas Eve church service. That, they claimed, was the moment she realized he had proposed. Her parents disagreed with that timeline. According to them, Shannon wasn't even at the church that evening. They were, and they said she hadn't attended. Despite the conflicting accounts, police and prosecutors felt confident that Shannon was responsible. After being formally charged, she was released on bail while waiting for her trial to begin. Then in May 2007, 5 months after Denita's death, Shannon contacted detectives. She said she wanted to revisit what happened on January 4th, the day of the crime. Accompanied by her attorney, she returned to the station and shared a version of events she hadn't told before. Shannon explained that things began unraveling after she ended her pregnancy. According to her, 𝐩𝐫 became angry and wouldn't let go of the relationship. She alleged that after the breakup, he began harassing her. This new account differed significantly from her earlier statements. At one point, she had claimed 𝐩𝐫 didn't want to raise a child with her, but now she described a more threatening version of the story, saying she bought the gun because she feared for her safety and for her children's as well. On the day before Denita's death, Shannon claimed something alarming happened. According to her, she returned home and found 𝐩𝐫 inside her bedroom. She said he told her to stay quiet and mentioned that he had a gun. She then said he forced her into her own car and made her drive to Durham with him. She said they later returned to Greensboro, and after that, 𝐩𝐫 left. The exact details of what supposedly occurred during their first trip to Durham were unclear, but Shannon told police that he came back the following morning and once again, under threat, demanded she accompany him to Durham. Shannon told detectives she feared for her safety and that of her children, so she complied. She said they returned to the apartment complex where Denita lived. According to her, 𝐩𝐫 exited the vehicle and went upstairs. She remained in the car until she heard an argument, then a loud noise. She said 𝐩𝐫 rushed back, told her to switch seats, and crouched in the back while she drove away. She claimed that when they passed the maintenance worker, 𝐩𝐫 was hidden in the back seat, which explained why the man didn't see anyone else in the car. It was a dramatic account, but investigators found the timing and details hard to accept. Shannon's version, while detailed, didn't change the detectives' minds. They felt her statements throughout the case had been inconsistent, and this new narrative came months after her original interview. Still, Shannon stood by her story and said she had been receiving threats from 𝐩𝐫 even after the murder. The prosecutor asked for proof of those threats. In response, Shannon returned with audio tapes she said captured 𝐩𝐫's voice threatening her, but when investigators listened to the recordings, they couldn't match the voice to 𝐩𝐫's. The man on the tape simply didn't sound like him. Instead of supporting her claims, the recordings cast more doubt. Police believed that rather than pointing to someone else, the tapes reaffirmed that their original suspect hadn't changed. While waiting for her trial, Shannon moved in with her parents in Charlotte. Her family claimed that 𝐀𝐫𝐜 continued to harass her even after the move. Then, in June 2008, Shannon reported a new incident to Charlotte police, saying 𝐀𝐫𝐜 had assaulted her in her home. Officers who responded didn't note cuts on her skin, and she repeated her claim at the hospital. However, after an exam and testing, the results did not support her allegations. The findings left investigators questioning yet again whether Shannon's story aligned with reality or was another attempt to shift the narrative. Shannon insisted she needed stitches for the cuts she had, but doctors noted the injuries were minor and didn't require any. During her interview, she pointed the blame once again at 𝐀𝐫𝐜, suggesting police should search his garbage for the weapon she claimed he used. Oddly enough, a few days later, 𝐀𝐫𝐜 found a knife in his trash can while taking it out. He called the police immediately. After speaking with neighbors, detectives were told that someone had been seen pulling up in a car, placing something in his bin, and leaving quickly. Investigators also reviewed 𝐀𝐫𝐜's phone records and timelines. Based on the data, they concluded that he simply wouldn't have had enough time to make a round trip of over 100 miles. To detectives, the assault claim now appeared to be another attempt to shift focus. Regardless of the accusations Shannon had made, the charges against her stood firm. In early 2010, her trial began. Prosecutors argued that Shannon was a former girlfriend who had become increasingly fixated on 𝐀𝐫𝐜 and couldn't handle his engagement to someone else. 𝐀𝐫𝐜 testified, sharing details of their relationship and the months that led up to Denita's death. The prosecution described Shannon's behavior as obsessive, escalating into harassment, and eventually to a fatal outcome when she learned about the engagement. The defense pushed back, presenting 𝐀𝐫𝐜 as the unstable one. They argued that his anger over Shannon ending her pregnancy drove the tension. Shannon herself testified, stating she feared 𝐀𝐫𝐜 and believed his behavior had become unpredictable in the weeks before Denita's death. The court also heard the audio Shannon had submitted, which she said captured 𝐀𝐫𝐜 threatening her. While the defense hoped this would support her claims, the prosecution emphasized inconsistencies in her story and the lack of physical evidence to support it. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury reached a verdict. On February 22, 2010, Shannon Crawley was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Her parents continued to stand by her, believing 𝐀𝐫𝐜 was never properly investigated and that their daughter was wrongfully convicted. For Denita's loved ones, the verdict brought some measure of resolution, but not true healing. No sentence could reverse what had been lost. Denita had done everything right, pursued her dreams, stayed grounded, loved deeply. Yet her life ended without warning, without cause. In the end, it wasn't her choices that failed her. It was someone else's obsession. And in a twist that could only be described as tragically ironic, Denita may have unknowingly passed her killer on the way down those steps, just moments before her world, and everyone else's, changed forever. 𝐀𝐫𝐜 admitted in court that he was ashamed of his actions, being involved with 2 women at once. While he wasn't charged, the consequences of his choices likely haunt him still. Police believe jealousy led to Denita's death, a reminder that unchecked emotions can destroy lives in an instant. Denita wasn't just part of a tragic story. She was a bright, loving, ambitious young woman whose life meant so much more than how it ended. Let's honor her memory by choosing honesty, empathy, and emotional accountability in our own lives. If Denita's story moved you, share this video to keep her memory alive and raise awareness. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.